Hello, hello. Welcome. My name is Spencer List. For those of you who don't know, welcome to the live stream. And we're going to get right into it shortly. If you are watching live, feel free to comment in what state, maybe what city you're watching from. Love to know where you're watching from. I know I've spoken to a lot of you who are in New York. There's a lot of things going on this month and even this week. And if you're watching the recording, welcome. Glad you could join when it was available for you and your schedule. So today we're going to talk about more executive compensation, trailing on what we talked about last week. So feel free to ask questions in the comments. And this week is a little bit different. I'm on LinkedIn, my Facebook group, and on YouTube. So I will occasionally check to see if there are any comments along the way. But feel free to say hello where you're watching from and ask any questions, and I will certainly stop and answer them. And then, of course, at the end, answer your questions as well. So let's start. Today, we're talking about how to read and evaluate your executive compensation package. So last week, we talked about what changes when you move up in your career to director, VP, SVP. Any type of executive role, a lot of things change. And one of them is how you get paid. And it can get really complex and confusing really quickly. You're going to start hearing a lot of terms you've never heard before. And the way you get paid just is no longer just salary, right? It's not just cash in your checking account. And you have to be a little bit more active participant in your compensation and start making some really important decisions that could drastically change your long-term financial plan in a good way. But also we don't want to mess it up, and we want to maximize all the opportunities that you now have available to you so you can achieve your financial goals. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Spencer List. I'm a certified financial planner, and I was a professional musician for almost 20 years. I played all the saxophones and woodwinds, have a master's in jazz studies. And now I'm a holistic financial life planner for music executives. I'm not a big fan of small talk or holidays, probably because I was born 5 minutes before Christmas, and I am caffeine free. So we can go to coffee, but I will not be getting one. But you're more than welcome to get coffee. I understand why people like it. Outside of music, I enjoy woodworking, and I grew up playing hockey. So I'm in Dallas, so I follow the Stars. I'm an MF Doom superfan. That's my favorite artist of all time. But I do like a lot of other 90s hip-hop, underground hip-hop, and then, of course, jazz is what I studied. So a lot of contemporary stuff there. But really, I just like any good music. And I'm also a husband and father of a now 6-month-old. So life has changed drastically in our family recently. So this time I will keep it really short because we have a lot to cover today. But why is a former professional musician now a financial planner? It's because of this screenshot. I was playing at the highest level, playing with household names, playing on a lot of albums and records. I was making a living just from performing. I wasn't teaching at this time. I was really achieving my dream and my goal. And I came home from a tour with just $67 to my name. And I had been saving. I always had enough savings cushion. And I felt like I was never really living paycheck to paycheck. I thought I was doing everything I should be with my money. Turns out I was missing out on a lot because I just had no idea. So I felt vulnerable and scared and unworthy. I spent my whole life, building this career and life that I thought I wanted. And it turns out that it wasn't affording me the lifestyle that I wanted, the way I was approaching it, not only music, but also money. So I started teaching myself everything I could about personal finance through books and podcasts. And I just sort of DIY changed my life. And I implemented everything I learned, and things changed quite quickly. Built up an emergency fund, started saving to a retirement account for the first time. And my income increased because I improved my mindset around money. And then I also bought my first property about 18 months after this day. So a lot changed. I really took a lot of action and it really works. And of course, that's almost 10 years ago. So our net worth is drastically better than this now. Our family is much better off than we were then. And I credit it to financial literacy. So that curiosity led me to want to learn this stuff from the professionals. And so I ended up, long story short, becoming a certified financial planner and starting my own firm for the music industry. So I also do free financial literacy and education to the music industry and pro bono financial planning sessions to those facing financial hardship. So, quick disclaimer, anything that we discuss today is strictly education. None of it is personalized financial advice. I need to know everything about your family, your goals, your values, your priorities, your relationship with money, your money story, all the above, to actually give you any advice. So some of this might not be relevant to you and might not be a good idea for you to implement. So we're just going to be educating so you can learn what these terms mean, what to look out for, so you have a better understanding of what's going on in your situation. Feel free to ask questions, and then of course we can talk privately outside of that. But none of this is actual advice for your personal situation. Okay, components of executive compensation. So we've got benefits and perks, equity compensation, performance bonuses, and base salary. So base salary, good baseline to start with. You're probably used to this. It's fixed compensation that you get every 2 weeks or twice a month. Usually those are the main ways people are paid, and money just hits your checking account, right? You're pretty used to that. The other three are usually what is new when you move into executive roles. So performance bonus, could be annual, could be quarterly. It really depends on your company and your agreement and arrangements. And sometimes it's a fixed amount, sometimes it's a percent, sometimes it's based on how the company's doing, and sometimes it's just discretionary. So the CEOs or the C-suite, whoever, the board decides, hey, we want to give out X to all of our employees because of Y or Z, right? So there's a lot of different situations depending on what company you work at. But those bonuses are typically also just cash. So it will usually be its own pay. It will have its own pay stub. Usually, in most cases, they will withhold the tax, but sometimes they don't. So you have to make sure that you're on top of that, especially when it's like a lump sum big payment. And you also need to check and coordinate if those bonuses are automatically applying any retirement contributions that you've set up. Typically, you'll set up a percent of your salary into like your 401k, for example. And some companies will apply that percentage to your bonus as well. So there is some planning to be done around there. And some of them don't automatically apply that percentage. So you definitely want to coordinate that and understand how your company operates there. Equity compensation. So this is in most cases very new if you're now an executive. So RSUs, ISOs, NSOs, ESPPs. I'm going to talk about all those. And then also deferred compensation. And then benefits and perks. So sometimes when you move higher, you might get some more benefits that other employees do not have access to. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Really depends on your company. Every company is different. And some of those benefits might make sense to take advantage of. Some of them might not. That really depends on your personal situation. But these are the main ways. So what you're starting to see, you'll see under performance bonuses, you see annual or quarterly incentives, right? So incentive is a key word here. Above your salary, a lot of your compensation is incentive based. And one of the incentives you need to understand is that with equity compensation, where they're paying you in the form of just straight up stock or the option to purchase stock, either at a discount or at a lower price than the current price. With vesting, which I'll explain here shortly, where you might have the option to buy these stocks, but your ability to actually exercise them, you have to wait 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years for these options to vest and become yours, right? So this is now incentivizing you to continue working at the company. So you are compensated more as you move up in your career, you are also incentivized to stay there. So if you ever leave, in most cases, a lot of those unvested forms of compensation go away, right? So we call those the golden handcuffs. Okay, they're really nice, really shiny. They're worth a lot, but they've got you handcuffed to the company in a sense. So there's some planning to be done there if you're ever deciding to change careers or leave companies. What's the trade-off there, right? And then it's these forms of compensation are also incentivizing you to perform and be productive at the company, because in these forms of compensation, for the most part, when the company does better, these forms of compensation are more valuable, right? So there is a psychological component where you are now more an advocate for your company and you're more vested in the success of your company. Now, how much you individually or one employee has on the impact of the company, it could be a lot, it could be negligible, right? I don't necessarily recommend having that mindset, but just understanding some biases and psychological factors that might be at play with some of this compensation, right? When it's salary, it's just cash. Like we can see it, it's black and white. It's I work, I get paid, right? All these other forms of compensation changes a lot of that mindset around your income. But you must remember that all of this is still your compensation. This is how you are paid for the work you do. It's just coming in different forms. Okay, some critical elements to review: vesting schedules, expiration dates, clawback revisions, tax timing. So vesting schedules, I mentioned this, every company and every stock plan has different vesting schedules. Sometimes the same will go for if your company does a match for your 401k, there might be a vesting schedule. So let's do a quick example. Let's just do your 401k match. Let's say they match 100% of your contributions up to 4% of your salary. So if you do 4% of your salary, your company will also contribute 4% into your 401k. What they might do is say, the company contributions we've made to your 401k do not become yours unless you stay at the company for 1 year, for 12 months. Now that does two things. It incentivizes you obviously to stay, right? That's a good thing for the company, but it can also incentivize the company to let you go. Now I'm not saying they would necessarily do that if the rules were 1 year, but you have to remember that all of these rules have two sides to them. So I've definitely seen that happen where people have stock option packages that vest over 4 years. And, of course, not accusing any company of actively doing this, but somehow the employee gets laid off before that last vesting happens, right? Certainly not saying that that's on purpose, but you have to understand that from the company's point of view, it may make financial sense to do that, right? So vesting schedules, most vesting schedules run around 4 years. The most common one I've seen there are two common ones, is it'll be 4 years, but you'll get the first 25% will happen after year 1, and then the rest happen monthly. And so the other 75% is divided among the last 3 years, but each little percent happens every month. So you're slowly getting more and more as time goes on. Another common one is that it'll be a cliff vest, meaning after 4 years, all of it vests at one time. But there are lots of different vesting schedules. Every company, every package is different, so you need to make sure you understand how that works. Expiration dates. So I don't have this on here. This says many stock options expire 90 days after departure. So if you are laid off or you change companies, you definitely want to understand what your stock options are at that point. Mainly the vested portions. You might have to take some action in the next 90 days. The more important expiration date is when you get stock options. Typically, what that means is once the stock option has vested and becomes yours, the next action you can take is to exercise that option, meaning you're declaring that you would like to purchase that stock at that, in most cases, lower stock price than what the stock is that day. And when you exercise, you have now purchased the stock. And the next step after that would be to either hold or sell. So at the expiration action, you have typically 10 years in most cases to exercise. If you wait longer than 10 years to exercise and say, hey, I would like to buy this at this price you said I could buy it at, then it expires and no longer exists. But there are some other expiration dates as well that you should understand. Clawback provisions. So this could be a situation where you are given a signing bonus when you start at a new job, but you have to stay there at least 12 months or longer or less, depends on what you negotiate, right? And so a clawback would happen if you violated that, right? You left or they fired you before that period, then you might owe some or all of that bonus back, right? So you definitely have to check for clawback provisions. And then tax timing, this is where it gets really complex. It depends on the stock option or the deferred compensation. And when RSUs vest versus other stock options, when they vest, there are different tax implications for all of them. So you definitely want to have tax estimates done throughout the year. You want to be tax planning and be on top of that because we don't want to let the tax tail wag the dog, meaning we don't want the taxes implications to drive the decisions we're making financially. But when you're at a higher income level, the taxes can get pretty steep. So understanding the tax implications of your decisions is really beneficial when you're in some of the higher brackets. So there is that trade-off of the tax versus the value you're getting from exercising or deferring your compensation. It really depends on your personal financial situation, your goals, your values, priorities, etc. And that is how we answer that question. It's not just a tax question. Okay, I'm going to do a light overview of some of the equity compensation, and then I'm going to go through a couple examples with some of the language you might see so that you can start to understand some of the terms. So an RSU is a restricted stock unit. An ISO is an incentive stock option. An NSO, or I usually call them NQSOs, is non-qualified stock options. And then ESPP is an employee stock purchase plan. So I'm actually going to start on the right with the ESPPs because this is actually the more common one, especially if you're this is usually the first equity benefit that comes into play as you move up in your career. It's more common and it's very simple. You basically get, typically every quarter, an opportunity to purchase your company's stock at a discount. It could be 5%, 10%, 15% discount. There are rules typically around that. I've seen situations where you get a bigger discount if you hold the stock for a longer period of time, where they force you to hold it longer. So if you want a bigger discount, that's not always the case. But basically what happens is you're able to purchase the stock today at a steep discount, which is a nice benefit to have. There are a lot of planning strategies you can do with that. Whether you hold or sell really depends on your financial plan. And then there are blackout periods where your company will not let you sell because since you work at the company, they don't want you making purchase or sale decisions on the company stock when you technically have insider information at the company. So you have to work around those blackout periods of when you can sell those stocks. And then, so it is simple as a concept of purchasing stocks at a discount, but to get the benefit of this discount from a tax perspective, there are some complicated rules on holding periods. I won't get into that today, but I've talked about that in the past, and I will certainly talk about it again. The next most common is the one to the left, which is RSUs, restricted stock units. And what this means is your company basically offers you stock that vests at a certain point, And when the stock vests, meaning it becomes yours, basically you're not choosing to exercise the right to buy the stock. You are just getting the stock at that date. And it is now yours to either hold or sell whenever you want. And so with RSUs, when those vest, you are taxed that day. And I don't mean you have to pay the IRS that day. I mean, on your tax return that year, you will show, let's say you had $5,000 worth of RSUs vest in February or March this year. That amount, regardless of whether you hold or sell and the stock goes up or down, the day that you got that stock, the value was $5,000, that is added to your taxable income that year. So you are paying taxes in that year on that amount that you vest the stock. Okay. And then ISOs and NSOs, these are options, right? Incentive stocks have a little bit more tax potential benefits, and non-qualified not as much. But these give you the option where you have the choice to purchase stock at a certain price that may be advantageous, okay? There are a lot of rules around them. You want to navigate them appropriately, but your company may offer them to you, and they can be a super amazing financial planning opportunity for you and your family. Some red flags and common pitfalls. So in most cases, a lot of the decisions you made, you can't really go back on them, right? So we want to make sure that you are confident in your decisions, you understand how they affect your financial plan, and that you are making the right decisions for you and your family with the knowledge that you have. AMT surprises. So a lot of people don't know about the alternative minimum tax. This is usually only triggered from incentive stock options. It's a little bit more advanced than today's live stream. But when you exercise incentive stock options, it could trigger the alternative minimum tax. It's basically a separate tax calculation that happens every year you file. And if it brings you over the threshold, you might owe more tax than you otherwise would have. So it could be a pretty big tax bill. So you just want to be aware of that if and when you're deciding to exercise incentive stock options. Poor diversification. So this is common with executives who are mostly paid. Eventually what happens is most of your pay becomes bonuses, stock options, and other forms of equity, like I've mentioned, right? Where your salary typically stops at your salary typically isn't going up to $500,000. It's usually going up to a certain number, and then anything above that is usually in the form of equity, right? So what happens is, or what can happen is your net worth is really tied up in your company because a lot of your compensation is now in the form of your company's stock. So not only do you have a ton of company stock all of a sudden, which, is great, but your livelihood already depends on this company because they pay your salary, right? They provide benefits. And so you spend all of your time, not all of it, but a lot of your time at the company and around the people that work at the company, right? So you already have a lot invested in the company, and a lot of your financial plan relies on this company. So to have even more company stock in your investment portfolio, it can really take over your net worth. And so we definitely want to make sure you're properly diversified. And then short exercise windows. So this is just for if you leave, you just want to make sure that you're on top of that if a layoff or company or career change happens. Questions to ask before signing. So timing, tax questions, exit questions, documentation questions. So when do your bonuses happen? Are there blackout periods for selling equity? Can the vesting accelerate under certain conditions? So there are cases where a death or disability could accelerate vesting. There's all kinds of things that could happen. And your package should detail all of those things. It just might be in the fine print. So either you need to read it or hire a financial planner to read it for you. Tax questions. So how will all of it be taxed? This is where a financial planner and a CPA working in tandem can really help you here. It can get really complicated really fast. Opportunities for tax planning, the answer to that is always pretty much yes. Will the company help with tax consequences? So in most cases, the company, they have sort of rules of thumb of what they're withholding. And a lot of times, especially with equity compensation, the automatic withholding is not enough. I think any equity compensation below $1 million is automatically withheld at 22%, and any equity compensation above $1 million is 37%. I could be wrong on that exact number. In most cases, your equity compensation is below $1 million, but 22% is typically not enough, especially if you're in the 37% tax bracket. A lot of this income is going above into that 37% bracket, and so it's getting taxed at a much higher rate. In this case, that's 15% more than what's actually being withheld. So there is, you definitely want to be making sure you're setting aside enough. Maybe even making quarterly tax payments. Exit questions. What happens to my compensation if I leave? So you'll see with a lot of the vesting schedules, whether the vesting gets accelerated and everything vests. If you've been there after a certain amount of time, maybe that kicks in, or if any unvested options disappear, right? If the company is acquired, so this happens a lot, especially in the music industry where companies are acquiring each other. This really depends on the company. So I can't really speak to that because it's always changing, but you want to understand what that looks like. So if you think that that's happening at your company, your HR department should be reaching out and letting everyone know, but if they're not, you should be asking. And then any non-compete restrictions. So just making sure you're okay to go to other companies if you do decide to leave. Documentation questions. Can I get examples of actual equity documents? Who can explain sections I don't understand? Sometimes companies will have somebody that can answer these questions, but from a personal financial planning standpoint, a lot of them are not qualified to actually give you any advice. So be careful there. And then actual equity documents. They should be able to provide you like the plan summary of these plans. But then I'll go through some sample language here in a moment. So in a moment being right now. So here is an RSU grant award letter. So this is, what the company would send you to let you know that they've awarded you some RSUs. So dear employee, we are pleased to inform you that you have been granted an award of 2,500 restricted stock units under the company 2025 Equity Incentive Plan. Each RSU represents the right to receive one share of company common stock upon vesting, subject to the terms and conditions outlined below. And typically there's a lot of stuff outlined below. And in this case, the vesting schedule is 25% of the RSUs will vest on the first anniversary of the grant date. So that's after 1 year. So let's say the grant date, we've got that next. With the remaining 75% vesting in equal quarterly installments over the following 3 years, contingent upon your continued employment with the company. So that's already telling you have to stay employed for this to continue vesting, right? And the 75% remaining after the first year is vested quarterly. Okay, so every 3 months, another piece of that 75% is going to vest to you, which means you will be taxed each time. And really what that means is at the end of the year, you'll add up all the vesting that you got. So if the stock price changes every time the vest happens, that will change the value that is added to your taxable income, okay? So in this case, the grant date is January 1, 2025, and the vesting start date is January 1, 2025. So that means what this should actually say is that the vesting technically starts on the same day, but the first 25% will vest on January 1 of 2026, okay? So vesting begins, you've started vesting, but it doesn't happen until 1 year later, the first 25%. And then expiration date, there's no expiration. You just get the stock. It's just yours, okay? And then you have to decide if you want to hold or sell. So that's a situation where you need to have a financial plan and you need a strategy around what you're going to do with those RSUs. And then typically they will withhold a certain amount. So we want to make sure that we might need to be withholding or setting aside more money for taxes on these. Okay, some samples from an employee stock purchase plan. So you are currently enrolled in the company 2025 Employee Stock Purchase Plan. ESPP is the acronym. This plan allows you to purchase shares of company common stock through post-tax payroll deductions. So you have to do it through your payroll, right? You have to tell them how much do you want to do this every quarter, usually in advance, and they'll do it for you, okay? So you can do up to 10% of your compensation. A lot of times they'll have limits, like dollar limits that you can do. This is just a random sample, so it's not real. And the offering period for this is the first half of the year, January 1 to June 30th of 2025. And the purchase date will happen on June 30th. So in this case, they do it twice a year. Every 6 months, there's an offering period, and the purchase happens at the end of that period. The discount rate is 15% off, and it's 15% off the lower of either the price when they first offered it to you, January 1st, or June 30th. So regardless of what the stock does, the discount price will be based on the lower of those two dates, whatever the stock price was that date. Share limit up to $25,000 worth of stock per calendar year. So that's the limit. It's an IRS limit, right? So you can only do so much of this per year. And then I'm not going to go into the details of holding periods, but there are rules around this for tax treatment to get the favorable taxes. Okay, but this is some of the language that you should understand when you see this. Deferred compensation. So this is a very complex one, but this is one where you have enrolled. So you might see some stuff like this. You have elected to defer a portion of your 2025 compensation through the company non-qualified deferred compensation plan. Your elections are you elected to defer 60% of your bonus and 10% of your salary for this year. The deferral period, the distribution is scheduled to begin in 10 years on March 1st, 2035, and you want the payout of this money to be in 5 annual installments, okay? So what typically happens is, well, I'll read the rest of this. Deferred amounts will be notionally invested in a range of market-based funds selected by the plan sponsor. Earnings will accumulate on a tax-deferred basis. Please note, deferral elections are revocable after the end of the year and subject to Code Section 409A distribution rules. So I've talked about deferred compensation. I have a lot of blogs about this, but I'm not going to go into the details of how deferred compensation works. But I will say in this case, you can see that we've deferred some of our bonus, most of our bonus, some of our salary, and we want this amount, which will grow over the next 10 years, to pay out starting in 10 years, but they will divide that up into 5 annual installments, okay? So it's not all happening at once in 10 years, okay? So this could be a situation where someone is wanting to pay for their children's school, and they know their child is going to start school, in 2035. So they want the payments to start in March, and, they got to pay tuition a few months after that. And so for the next 5 years, they've got these payments coming out that grew over time, right? So there's a lot of strategy and financial planning of why you would do something like this, but this is some of the language that you will see when you've made these options. So what it looks like if it goes wrong: failing to plan ahead for your comp package can lead to these painful scenarios. You neglect your equity, you just let it sit. Or you just don't understand the taxes around it, and you just get this huge tax bill and you have no idea why. You might lose value because you didn't understand how the vesting worked. And then deferred compensation, if you don't have a plan, you might miss out on some of the opportunities you had by doing a deferred compensation plans. A lot can go wrong, a lot. And big painful numbers can happen. So you definitely want to make sure that you're doing this right. What it looks like if it goes right: you have a clear understanding of all your forms of compensation, and you understand the value of all of those forms of compensation. You understand the timing of when you need to make elections, when you need to deal with taxes, and reminders. Right? Because you might need to take some actions based on your strategy. If your strategy is to exercise and sell right away, you need some reminders that tell you, hey, I need to go log in here and do this thing real quick, okay? Intentional decisions. So you're making deliberate choices that align with your goals. You're not just guessing and just sort of throwing numbers in the wind and not knowing how they impact your financial plan or your life. And strategic integration. So you understand how each of these things fit into your long-term plan. All of these forms of compensation have different purposes in your financial plan, and you need to understand those. So a quick case study, really high level. So problem, newly promoted VP at a major label accepted RSUs and deferred compensation without proper review. Within 1 year, they triggered AMT, the alternative minimum tax, missed a critical vesting window, and had no liquidity strategy in place. So we performed a comprehensive review of their compensation structure, and we identified immediate tax liabilities and missed opportunities for optimization. And then we restructured the deferred compensation arrangements. We implemented a proactive tax planning strategy and developed a comprehensive equity management plan with clear vesting and liquidity milestones. So this person went from having no clue what's going on, feeling very stressed and confused, to understanding exactly what they're getting, what decisions they're making, and what value it's providing to their life. So you need to assess your current package, which can take some time, but it's worth it. This is a lot of money at stake. You need to note the vesting schedules, the expiration dates, and tax implications. You need to develop a strategy for all of these. And then seek professional help. In most cases, I would say most executives don't have time to understand all of these things. And so having a professional who can quickly evaluate your situation and educate you and help you make decisions is far more valuable than the cost. I do have an executive comp checklist. If you want, you can go to my website. I'll show you that in a second, motiveplanning.com, and search executive comp checklist. And you can download that for free if you join my newsletter. And that's a great place to start. But of course, you can ask questions and we can talk about your unique situation. So really quickly, my firm is Motif Planning. So I do financial planning for music executives and just any executive really. But I'm flat fee, advice only, and holistic. So I don't have any hidden costs. I don't sell products. I don't make commissions or kickbacks. I do not manage your assets. So I'm advice only, meaning I show you how to invest your own money. I don't take custody of your money. And I'm holistic. So we're not just talking about your investments. We're talking about your equity compensation, your employee benefits, your cash flow, your insurance, lifetime tax planning, estate planning, major life decisions, college planning, literally every part of your financial life. So if you want, you can schedule a free consultation, see if we're a good fit at motiveplanning.com. Just click the schedule a call, and I'd love to hear your story. If we're not a good fit, I will certainly recommend you to someone who is. But I'd love to meet you. Okay, Q&A. I'm going to check and see if we have any comments. So give me 1 second, and I'll come back and answer those if we got them. But you can connect with me, motiveplanning.com. I've got my website, has all my services, fees, planning process, FAQs, etc. But I also have, if you click education, I've got a whole blog with tools, just unlimited resources there. And then also you can click resources is where you can sign up for pro bono planning or recommend someone to do that. You can follow me at Spencer List. I'm mainly on LinkedIn, but you can typically find me anywhere else as well. You can email me, spencer@motiveplanning.com, and then also subscribe to my newsletter. The best way to do that is just go to my website. It's just at the bottom, but it's pretty much everywhere as well. So I'd love you can get notifications of new blog posts, resources, tools, updates, just constant resources. So let me check real quick to see if we've got any questions. I got to check all 3 places now. Okay. I don't see any. So I will have, the recording will stay up, I think, on all 3 of these platforms. And I hope to see you all next week. Feel free to email me your questions if you're watching the recording, or comment, and I'll see the comment and reply there. And I hope you all have a good rest of your day.